Hi, I'm Sportster Paul. Today we're going to start tearing down this 1982 Iron Sportster motor, giving you tips the whole way how to put it back together. Today is going to be the pushrod tubes, and tied into that would be adjusting the valves. So let's start the tips and tricks to help you not screw it up all the ways I've done over the years and all of my Sportsters, okay? All right, so we've got the sky cam up above us. Probably won't be using that much today, but it's good to know it's up there if we need it. And I've got another camera over here, and that's focused in on this area here so you can watch the work as we do it. I got a piece of tape over the VIN number so some scumbag doesn't claim it's stolen and then the police take it from me and give it to him. So the first tip, I used to replace these valve lifters, the block. The big expensive, it was $135 in the day. Now I'm sure it's $200–300 for these 4 blocks that go here. And the reason, Duncan Keller tipped me off in San Jose, I wouldn't clean everything when I did my valve adjustments. So all the crap, all the grit would fall down right here on this base where the cork is, then fall into the valve block and ruin it. And then I'd have to buy new blocks, sometimes new lifters themselves. So the first tip, I happen to like gunk. You wash, clean it all off. The hose is just as important. Get a lot of water, get everything clean. Then blow it off. Try to get an air compressor in your life. Get an air blow off, start at the top, work it down, and make sure you get really good down here where the cork is for the bottom seal. Because you're using a blow off, you should have your safety glasses as well. These are 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, Nuvo, N-U-V-O. They got reading, it's like bifocals. They got little reading things so I can see my old blind eyes, but my far vision's fine. So these are great if you need a set. So that's the first tip, clean. It's like an operating room where would you want the doctor, you know, bead blasting over here and grinding something over there and sparks flying? This is just like having a human being open. You want to be that meticulously clean. And by doing that, you know, Duncan wondered after I bought the second set, he said, you know, how do you adjust your valves? And even though it would cost him money, he wouldn't be able to sell me more of these for big dollars. He explained, no, you got to blow this down. Now, I'm as lazy as the next good American. So a lot of times I haven't done the valves in a while. I'm like, well, I'll just get my airline, keep air compressor charged up in the garage. I'll just blow it off. Just do the exhaust. The exhausts are the ones that tighten up because that's what you're constantly fighting them, getting tighter. And if they get too tight, it burns the exhaust valves. The intakes, once you set them, they'll stay for a long time. But with cast iron heads, the valves are wearing their way up into the cast iron, and that makes it tighter. So you do the adjustment where you'll see that later. You spin the rod, make sure that's all good. And it's not like once every 10,000 miles. This is like every 500 miles you want to check. You get a feel for it, depending on your driving style, how good the heads are, what the valves are made out of, how fast those 2 exhaust valves are receding. And a lot of times, like I say, I just check the exhausts. If they're spinning free, it's like, why even bother with the intakes? But if the exhausts are binding already because the valves have receded a little, well, then let's pop the intakes. It doesn't take that long. We'll show you those tips and tricks next. Okay, once you've got it all clean so you don't get grit down here and ruin your valve lifter blocks, work out of the toolbox. Screwdriver, let's look at this camera here. This is about the size screwdriver I like to use. Sometimes, where can I find it? Sometimes a long, thin one might be a little better. See if we can compare these two. You know, you can kind of see. It's hard to do backwards, but trust me. Here, we'll do it like this. So, this is the size I usually end up using. You go to these clips up here. You slip the screwdriver into the little pulled off part of the clip. And what you're trying to do is swing it out. You're not trying to pop it straight out because it ain't going to come from the above. It's pocketed in up there. You're trying to swing it past this spring-loaded cup right here, okay? So it's a twisting motion out. Can you see that? Like this, right? So twist it out, pop. Next thing, the tips keep coming. Have a container for all the parts, even for something as simple as this. So I'm going to do this real quick. We'll probably jump ahead. No need to watch me do this. Pop here. How's the audio doing? Huh? It's gone away, so that's typical. And let's do this one. should have safety glasses on now, by the way, because they're spring-loaded and pressure. But don't do as I do, do as I say. And now, screwdriver goes back, because I worked with Porsche mechanics when I was young, and they taught me about always putting stuff back. Okay, now that you've got the clips off, you can pull up any given push rod, and you can feel, oh, look how the Harley manual says, without a hint or trace of binding. Now, the headache with these late model, I think 81 or so, 79, 80 and later, they took the kickstarter off. So you can't use the kickstarter to feel the valve go up and down and make sure you're in the right place. Instead, either you're bumping the electric start, which we can't do here on the bench, or you're somehow getting to, you maybe take this cover off, and you're getting to this sprocket here. And with a wrench or with a screwdriver or the chain or something. In a bike, if you don't want to bump the starter, put it in fourth gear, because it works out when you think about it. You want it in fourth gear so it moves the engine less for any distance you're traveling. Put it in fourth gear and just roll the bike a little, and you should be able to move the engine around to make sure. It's miserable when you don't have a kickstarter on the bike. To do all this, it helps to take the spark plugs out so that it's easier to turn the motor over. There's a place in a 45-degree engine where one sitting, and it's kind of here now, where all the valves are down. Don't trust that. You want to feel the engine work. You want to make it go up and down a couple times to make sure it's seated, and everything's cool about that. So I'm sure if the exhaust, well, I just did these actually, so there's no mystery. See, that's fine. So next thing, we'll show you how to do a valve adjustment, because this is about how far you go when you adjust the valves. One of the tips and tricks from the old days, you could get a clothespin, and you can put a clothespin right here to keep this from flopping down and being in your way. I've also used, like, you can get a rubber band and put it behind the thing and pull that rubber band, you know, double up some rubber bands and put them up. After a while, you get good enough at it that you're just going to use the wrench to hold it up and feel your way through it. Now for wrenches, same thing. Go to your box. You need a 7/16 and a 1/2 inch. 7/16. Let me do one of these up here. It might be easier for you guys to see. Here's a good one. Oh, this was the one that's binding and having a trouble. So the 1/2 inch wrench fits here. 7/16 is for this jam nut down here. Although it doesn't feel right, it's got to be right. You can see, like, this nut, it's been rounded over. That's stupid. You don't need, that's methamphetamine abuse. People lose the nerves in their hands and over torque everything. You don't need a lot of pressure on this. If it loosens up and falls, all you do is get a real easy to hear loud clattery noise. It doesn't really damage anything as it pops up and down. So you don't have to reef this jam nut down. I don't know if I should even tell you. I tend to keep it, well, maybe not that loose. I tend to keep the jam nut just barely on. And then, like I said, I'm a lazy American. Sometimes I just come in, and even though it could damage the roller if you're not careful, you just reach in here and you can, it's loose enough that you can operate it. Of course, if it loosens back down there, it's analog like everything on a Harley, an old one especially. When you tighten the jam nut, it stretches it up, makes it a little tighter. So you go back and forth a few times till you get it, and always err on the loose side, not a hint or trace of binding. Especially on the exhausts. I do know you can it makes it a little noisier when they're pretty loose. They get looser as they heat up. That's the beautiful thing about a pushrod bike. As the cylinders heat up and expand, it opens up the valve clearances. So that's a fortunate thing. But adjust it, that's why you're supposed to adjust them cold. Motor engine's supposed to be cold, and not a hint or trace of binding. And when you get all of those done, then you can snap the clips back in. We'll show you that later. All right? Okay, next thing. Let's say you're trying to, maybe the corks are leaking. You got oil here. Usually, people think it's the corks or something. They try O-rings. Don't ever put silicone here, because that silicone falls down in the motor, gets in the roller bearings, and blows up your entire motor. A lot of times, I hate to tell you folks, but the reason it's blowing oil out the pushrod tubes is because the pistons have too much blow-by. The rings are shot in the bike, and there's pressure building up in the engine, and the only way the pressure is getting out is blowing out oil through the pushrod tubes. There are several mistakes that people make, me first, that could account for the oil. If you put it together and it's blowing oil, I'll show you what can go wrong then. But the next thing, you can release the jam nut, use your 7/16. You release the jam nut. Let's find one here. Here's one. You can release the jam nut, and if you're lucky, it free runs. That's heaven in a Harley, when you can just use your finger like this and get it all the way up. And so I'm going to do that. There's no need to watch all this. I'm just going to loosen all of these. You can run the jam nut all the way up, and then, if you're lucky, it free runs, and you can run the 1/2 inch size, the actual lifter itself, you can run that all the way down. And out comes the pushrod tube. Obviously, you want to be real clean when you're doing this. Put it in the bin, right? Everything's meticulously clean. And I'm going to do the other 3, and then I'll show you all the things that can go wrong in this supposedly simple little thing that'll cause oil leaks and problems, okay? All right, like all old Harleys, there's always a problem. I got the 2 intakes out, they just pulled right out. The exhausts, they're just a little tight. I mean, it's loose, and maybe if I turn this motor, but it's no electric start. The trick I use there, I happen to have this nice needle nose, and see if I can do it from behind like this. You can get under the push rod here, and if you're lucky, you can pop it out. If you're not lucky, you push it further back in and you make your life miserable. But lucky. Oh, so this one, I know this one's even a little tighter. Like I say, I should just turn the motor, but that's tough life. I'm gonna instead, because this is a little tight here, I want to get closer and just come up here with the needle nose. There's a way to come in here and pop it, usually, and you're pushing the valve, right? That's the only reason this works. It's because you're actually lifting the valve up. You get it right in. You can watch the profanity happen real time. Do not, whatever you do, put something behind and try to pry it out. That doesn't get it. You got to come from here. Maybe because I'm lucky, I can come from behind here. Yeah. So that's what I did. I came from behind. Let me get around so I can show you folks. Sometimes even though the engine, you turn it and they're a little bit too tight. So you got to do this even if you can have a Kickstarter on a decent engine. So what I was able to do is come in from back here, because fortunately there's no generator in this one. So I was able to come in from back here, get under it, and pry it up and out. So into our bin. One of the intakes, this one here, it's real tight. It was miserable, so I've marked that with a marker. So we'll get that figured out, what's going on. I got a bin. I put all this stuff together. This was missing. This engine was missing the valve stuff, or I took it off years ago and forgot. So I've got this now marked to play around and make sure that why it's so tight and doesn't want to move. Figure that out. Something's dented, something's bent, and find the 2 new parts that'll work. Meanwhile, this one, the same one that has the headache with the tightness, the jam nut doesn't free run. So that's a project. You take this little thing out, because you're going to be adjusting valves a lot, and you're only going to have it all out very rarely. So take all of this out, take the entire assembly out, get a tap and die, clean it up, and make it so that it free runs. Either that or go to Amazon or eBay or J&P Cycles and buy. I like custom chrome, what I call name brand aftermarket custom chrome. Not so much V-twin, although I think V-twin's gotten pretty good quality lately too. And get a nice set of these, because they are hardened, right? You do want something well made. So that's getting them. Now they're all out. They're in a bin. They're safe. If you're going to, the right way to do it is to actually take everything apart, clean it meticulously, wash it all off, blow it with air. Same thing, because there's dirt, just like now there's dirt. So if you're working on other stuff, like we'll be doing later, you want to cover this area up with a shop towel. I'll go get some. And keep any more dirt. That's your enemy, right? The dirt coming down means you got to buy 300, 200, whatever they are now, valve lifter blocks. So now we've got them out. Let me show you now all the ways that you can have problems. It looks like such a simple thing, but nothing simple in a Sportster. Let me show you what's going on that sometimes you might screw up, or the guy before you owned it screwed it up, okay? Okay, here's the little tricks with this supposedly simple little push rod cover. Note we've put a shop towel to keep the dirt from falling down into those lifter blocks, so you don't have to buy $300 worth of lifter blocks. This is a junk. The real ones are in the bin. This is a spare that I've got to show you. Okay, first problem people have, this long lower tube, one that goes down here, it's not symmetrical. You can't flip it either way. If you look here, let's see if I can get a nice angle for you folks. See, this is kind of a flare, whereas this side, it's crimped flat and it's a flat. It's different, right? Flared out, different. The trick is the flared out part goes up against the cup, right? The flat kind of part, that goes down against the lifter base. That goes down against the cork in the lower lifter. So that's problem number one you might find. Okay, problem number two you could have with this, see the clip would be off, right? So let's pop this clip off if I can. So there's the clip. So here's the upper part. What happens, people never notice, there's a washer, a flat washer, a real thin, narrow flat washer. See it there, right here? What happens is this cork won't be nice and new. It'll be black, and the flat washer sticks to it. People take it apart, don't notice there's a steel thrust washer, this little flat washer, and they toss it. Then when they put it together, the spring itself presses against the cork, and the spring isn't perfectly flat. It's ground, but it's not perfect. That's why, since 1950 whatever, they put this little flat washer in, right? So that's a mistake many of us make. Make sure that I had like a dozen of these in the junkyard in my swap meet box. I had one extra washer. I had to take apart an O-ring set to get the four for the ones I ended up using. So make sure, if you don't have it, go buy them. I'm sure they want $5, $10, some obscene amount of money, but you really do need this. So that goes against here, and then the cork goes on, and that works. Okay, so that's problem number two you could have. Okay, problem number three, you have to make sure the cork is not too big. I started with a bunch of corks I had left over because I'm going to take all this apart and wash it, and you know, all this is just demonstration right now for you folks. So I had a whole spare bunch. Here's some of them, right? Whole spare bunch of corks. It's like, yeah, I'll put it together with these spare corks. Wouldn't go together. Why? Because the corks, this batch of corks is too big. See that size? Can you see how it's bigger? Is that coming in? Right? So the cup, it'll go over the smaller cork that I found, but when you try to adjust it, you'll never get this cup down back over that cork. It's really insidious. Okay, here's what's so tricky. You might think you're in good shape because if you take the little flat washer and you take the little spring out of it and you take the cup itself, you can take this oversized cork and it'll go in. That one goes in easy, too easy. Here, it's a little tight, but the trick is you say, oh, okay, it fits, but it doesn't, because you can also tell it's tight on the inner. So you got to kind of stretch it to get it on. And when you do that, you've made it too big. And I tried pliers, so now it gets nasty. I was lucky because I started looking through my stash. Oh, here's a bunch. They're a little bit too big. Here's a bunch. They're a little better, but not right. And thank gosh, this glassine wax paper set, they're the right diameter that lets you slide. Even though they're all sets of 12 meant to do the whole top end, it was only because I had this spare one. I don't know what to tell you if you've got the big ones. Take it to a belt grinder. Now you're burying abrasive into the cork. It's going to fall, and that's a horrible thing. Take a razor. That'd be what I'd do. I'd get a razor blade. Midnight, the run's tomorrow. You got to get it done. Take a razor blade and just try to shave it a little. The corks work pretty good. They went to O-rings later. At the end of this, I'll show you an O-ring set that I had in my junk pile. I don't like the O-rings. Corks work fine. Cork is an amazing sealing material. And remember, everything's expanding and contracting. That's what the spring does for you. So that was the third problem. First one, don't reverse this. Second one, make sure the little flat washer is up against the cork and the spring. Next problem, make sure you've got a cork that the cup fits over. And you can see, let's put it all together now. Where's the cup? It's in my hand. Put the cup together, put the spring in the cup, put the flat washer behind the spring, take the one that fits, and here we'll get remember, the flared part goes up against the cork, not the flattened part, which goes down against the base, the cork on the base. And now you can see, right? It easily moves. How can I show you? There we go. Easily moves. Otherwise, you're going to have all kinds of misery. So you got to kind of pre-assemble stuff and make sure it's going to work. Of course, you got to make sure you're absolutely clean, that everything's nice. Some folks use gloves. I'm not against them, but you got to look at those gloves. They're a little piece of, not nylon. What are they? Not Tyvek. It's latex and nitrile. A little piece of nitrile broken off, you make damn sure it's not in there, because a little chunk of glove would be just as bad as a piece of silicone. Sand gets ground up in the roller bearings. That's not a problem. But a little piece of sticky stuff like that, rubbery stuff, that jams the roller bearing somewhere in this motor and blows it up. So that's the third trick with what looks like a really simple thing. Okay, so I noticed that one of the units on the front intake was real tight. It was binding up. It's the lower that I happened to pick out of my junk pile. It's either dented or hot around or something. That's what you do with junk. You throw it away. You don't leave it for the next guy to find like somebody did for me. The push rod that was binding so tight, it might just been because it's dry. I just found a similar push rod. I had 4 or 5 of them. So hopefully I fixed that tightness sliding up and down. Now, that same one, the front intake, didn't have, it wouldn't free run. So this is what goes down in the lifter, is jam. Of course, it's some weird thread. It's not a 28, I don't know what. It's a 32. It's a fine thread, weird size. So I didn't have a tap and dive for it. But what I did is I put a little tri-flow on it, because there's Teflon, something in tri-flow, and took a drill, chucked a half-inch and a half-inch socket into a drill, and just ran it back and forth, and it kind of free runs now. It's still not as loose as you'd like it when you're doing, but since it's on the intake, and if it was on the exhaust, right, move it to the intake, because you don't mess with the intakes near as much. So let's see if I can do this backwards. So that's that. So let's get that down in here. Of course, I'm being way dirtier. You should be washing your hands and taking care of everything. Let's get this all the way down. And that same deal we're going to have on the way together, because we've got to put this back together to show you some of the last couple tricks. I'll do the intake in the rear first, because I don't have to pop that one in. It'll be fairly straightforward. I used to keep them, mark them, the intake goes, the rear. It should all be interchangeable. Should be. It's not bad practice to actually mark them and keep them together, even if you wash them and stuff. But, okay, so here's this. I'm not being as clean as I should, because this is all coming apart again. So, new corks that pop in. you know, and I can use the bigger corks from these other packages, the ones that are bigger diameter that the cup won't fit over. So I've got new corks down all in the base, and I stuck new corks up here. Make sure you got a cork up there. Make sure you don't have two. It's usually hard to get two stuck in. And what next? Get the push rod. Here it is. Push it up. And because it fits good, and I'll just do this one by hand. Little Mickey Mouse, but you'll get the picture. And then it's that same adjustment routine, right? This is when it's great when it free runs, right? Because you can just use your fingers. And it's a little hint of tracer binding there. So now, let's say that I've used my 7/16 and my 1/2-inch wrench. Well, it will only take a second. Let's do it. Like I say, you could use a clothespin to hold this up or hook. People put little hooks and all that. After a while, it's not that hard to use a wrench, even all doubled up like this. Let's see if I can get this jam nut down. See if it's as cooperative as the rest of it. Yeah, see, this free runs too. This is heaven. So because the jam nut, this will be our demonstrator, then we'll do the other three while off camera. I won't waste your time. So the jam nut goes down pretty low. Get here. There, I felt it tighten up. And like I say, I don't reef, you know, I just say, oh, really get it tight. No, I've never had one back out. And matter of fact, this is probably really poor practice, but a little bit of jam. Okay, so it's a little loose. So let's go up, which means you unscrew, if you can. So go up a little bit. Of course, oh, now it's tightened. Hey, how about that? I have pretty close. Go down a little. In general, you want it to be a little loose because when you put that jam nut, it stretches stuff up and tightens it up. And you go back and forth like everything in a Harley. You go back and forth 20 times and make sure not a hint or trace of binding. The intakes, they can be a little draggy, but it's very obvious. It's not a mystery thing. You'll get an idea when it's dragging. But when it's nice and spinny like this, you're done. So, oops, let's go here. Let's go here, because I'm doing spring stuff. I'll get my safety glasses on. I'll get my favorite. Now I'm going to use the smaller, thinner one. Let's see how it works. Now here's the trick. Okay, so you get the, let's see, can you see this? Yeah. So you get the screwdriver blade up under this part, and it goes up, right? So you push that up. Now here's the tricky part, right? Can you see it? You pull it forward a little. I'm not doing it right. It's hard to work backwards from the screen. Here, let me see if I can work forward. There. You see how it just popped up a little bit? It's on the aluminum lip. It's not pocketed up. So when you push up on it, it pushes it back. You kind of pull it forward a little, and it pops up that extra 1/8 of an inch. Then when you're sure that it's pocketed up there, you make sure it's right down here. You can get this here, push up, make sure it's all nice. Get your screwdriver, put it down here, and pop. Life is good. You actually by hand usually, you can turn this if you want this to be dead straight and all this anal stuff like I like to do. Down at the bottom here, you can make sure it's nice and centered. A new cork will be flat, and you can kind of move things around a little. So I like to make it centered, so there's a nice little annular ring around the cork, so it's centered in the cork. Not that big a deal. It's a Harley. It takes a little misalignment in stride. So that's one of the cool things about a Sportster, why they're superior in every way to every other Harley-Davidson, because they spent the money to have 4 separate camshafts, so there's not all this weird valve angularity. Even a dual cam, they tried to improve it from the single camshaft early, 74s, but the big bikes all have some goofy angularity, whereas a Sportster, I think maybe even to this day, they probably went to a chain by now, I assume. Chains are quieter. That's the problem. Gears are a little noisy and whiny. But the 4 separate cams, these are all in a line, and so there's not these funny angles as the push rods work that the cam's got to account for. So done with that. I'll do the other 3. We'll come back and congratulate ourselves on a job well done. Back in a minute. Okay, a little bonus. I mentioned that in the later years, 83, I don't know when, we'll look it up. They went to an O-ring setup. So here's a set of push rods made for the O-ring. One of the big differences is this bottom part, the upper part here. I think the clips are identical. Thank gosh for some small. But this part, where the cup goes, it's much longer. I assume because they learned cork will take up a lot of inaccuracy, but with an O-ring, like here, these had two. I'll look in the parts book. The same flat washer, obviously it has to have that. It would never seal in a million years. I don't like the O-rings. I like them on the intake manifold instead of the rubber bands, but I do not like them here. And I just think there's just too sloppy and too much inaccuracy cork will take up that an O-ring won't. You can see down in the bottom. Let's see how we show that over here. It's got a little lip now, so the bottoms are different, and a little lip. I'm not sure if they changed the valve lifter blocks or not. I don't have a motor that, for some reason I ended up with these maybe at a swap meet. I don't think they came off of this engine. They might have. I'll go look in the parts book. I can tell you stock ones or early model ones with corks are going back on because I don't like the O-rings. So there's a little, you might have O-rings. Because the metal parts are made for O-rings, you got to stick with O-rings. Oh, you can see here on the top part, right? It's different. There's a whole little lip to keep the O-ring from collapsing in. So that exists. I think they interchange. If you want your 1957 Sportster to have O-rings, I don't think it's an improvement. So that's the O-ring tube style. I prefer the corks. I wanted to show you, I got this tight front exhaust. Like I say, I might not have the engine rotated the right spot, but there are times even if you rotate it. So you make sure it goes up nice. You see it's there. This is the size. And you kind of get it in between. And hopefully it takes a lot of force because you're actually lifting the valve up. And you can see I got it up. It's supported. Actually, you probably can't see it. No, you can. It's right there. Let's see if I can pop. Ah, that happy sound. Still hasn't gotten it. You don't want to push, you don't want to be prying on the soft aluminum. You will wreck it. Did it go? Not yet. I'm still up on the edge. See if I can pry down here. No. See, well, that didn't work so well. I'm glad you're seeing all the screw-ups. See, now it's falling, it's dirty. You got to take it all apart and clean it again. Start all over again. Of course, all kinds of junk is dropping down in here. Let's try it again. Maybe this isn't the right. Why am I having such a hard time with this one? I don't know. It really shouldn't be that hard to pop in. Okay, let's try it this way. Same trick as before, coming from behind. Look at this, I'm sweating. Ouch. Well, kind of popped. It's amazing that it can get this close and not do what it's supposed to do. I figure better to show you this misery than make you think everything's easy. There's going to be homicide. All right, let's try it again. Okay, first, let me go back. Unedited, misery uncut. Make sure I got that thing as far down. I may have to try moving the motor a little. But like I said, I've had Sportsters. Oh, see, no wonder it's screwed up because it's not in. Oh, yes, it is in all the way. Let me do this. Still recording? Yes. That little tiny extra turn. See, they're shorter and longer push rods too, right? That's an inaccuracy. I didn't have this much trouble the first couple times I did this for this practice runs. It's only when you're doing it for real. I don't know. You can see how much force it takes to push up a valve in a Sportster. Come on, please. It's literally a couple of thousandths of an inch. That's how little I've got to lift this thing and why it's not lifting. I mean, there is a lot of force, but I mean, not that much force. Let's try it this way, pulling it towards us. In. See that misery? Of course, all the junk is falling in. That's not a good thing, but close enough. Take this, get your, pull that up, pull it forward. See it go up that little extra bit. Clip goes in. Straight, down. Needless to say, if I had a Kickstarter or I had electric, I'd be bumping this to try to get that down. But like I say, sometimes I'm violating my own principles because I'm not getting my tools put back where they belong. And a professional always goes back to the box. First time I had a $70 worth of snap-on wrench stay in the cowl of a VW I was working on. Then I understood about putting your tools back. All right, so now you can polish it and do all that stuff. Obviously, when you got it apart, you can clean it, make it look good. But that's what it takes. Those are all the little tricks with something so simple. I thought I was going to get the top end off today. I saw I had a whole subject just with these pushrod tubes. Next, we'll do a short video, I promise, about the oil lines, because there's a whole subject to that too. So for now, thankfully, back together. We'll take it apart and start again with the oil lines next video. Thanks a bunch. See you next time.